holy is the ultimate gamer. He's earned that name.
What's to do, YouTube? It's Holy One, and I just had to make a quick video about Plays No Games USA, aka Review Tech USA, because he is about to make a really stupid console peasant quote about and defend 30 FPS on next-gen consoles and say, oh, it's the same thing on PC, and his excuse for it is amazing. So let's watch his video.
Too big of a deal about this issue with the PlayStation 5, and in my opinion, honestly, it's a non-issue.
Actually, Rich, it is a big deal. We're paying $700 for a next-gen console, as that's the leaked price for this, and it's been $600. We expect to get nice graphics, but Microsoft isn't making it an issue. They're pushing for 60 to 120 frames per second on probably indie games, last generation games, and probably some exclusives. Heck, Gears of War 5 had a tech demo, and the game was running at 4K 60 with ultra textures and settings. So the horsepower is definitely there. So right off, we're starting terribly.
I did a video on it, drunk on mojitos. It was quite interesting.
Ah, that explains it. The poor man was drunk when he made that quote. Maybe he's drunk now.
And we saw trailers for a bunch of games, and it has come out from Digital Foundry that a lot of these games are running at 30 FPS, and people are losing their minds over it.
And rightfully so. And Rich, the one thing you left out in the video, the resolution of some of these games is 1500p at 30 FPS. Now, yes, maybe it's because of the video rendering, but mostly when people show tech demos, Rich, these tech demos run at 60 frames or more. Ubisoft does this all the time. They did it with Watch Dogs, and the game got downgraded after it released for the consoles. Developers usually show the games in the best possible state. That's why they showed it with ray tracing. That's why they had to turn down settings like resolution and frame rates.
For this, especially when it comes to the Demon Souls remake that is coming to the PlayStation 5, because if you look at the PlayStation blog, it says this: from Japan Studio and Blue Point Games comes a remake of the PlayStation classic Demon Souls.
Now, Rich, I'm sure this last-gen game is going to run at 60. It's a remake. All remakes should be running at 60 frames per second. Otherwise, it's just a remastered, basically.
In addition to beautiful shadow effects and ray tracing, players can choose between two graphics modes while playing, one focused on fidelity and one focused on frame rate.
Which is great. They give you options, which all these games should do. Any game that runs at 30 frames per second with 4K or whatever should have a 60 frames per second mode at 1080p. These consoles can do it, Rich. Explain to me why that's not a bad thing.
And this is getting blown out of proportion, and people are losing their minds saying that next-gen consoles...
No, Rich, people are not losing their minds over options. They're losing their minds because games are running at 30 FPS on next-gen hardware.
...really aren't going to be next-gen, and let's talk a little bit, because I think people are blowing this way out of proportion. Well, actually, there's a good
No, Rich, you're damage controlling this way out of proportion. Continue.
reason why PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X games will still be running at 30 FPS, and it's not because of lack of hardware performance. Keep in mind, both of these consoles have 8-core Zen 2 processors, CPUs in there, and...
I see you don't know about PC hardware that well, Rich. I'm going to explain something to you. CPUs have nothing to do with frame rate at 4K. Anything that runs at 4K is GPU heavy. The only time CPUs become dependent is with physics or when the resolution is dropped to 1080p or 720p. The GPU is doing all the horsepower at 4K. So you're already giving out misinformation.
The graphics processors are RDNA 2 in both the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. And on the Series X, the compute performance is 12 teraflops, and on the PS5, the compute performance is 10.3 teraflops. So there's plenty of hardware grunt under the hood of both of these systems.
Okay, so if there's enough hardware grunt under the systems, and I don't know why you're bringing up Microsoft into this, because Microsoft is already pushing for 60 frames. So I don't know why you're bringing up horsepower just to damage control for the system to be at 30 frames per second.
So you'd think they'd be able to run games at 4K 60 most of the time. but there's a reason why they can't.
And what is that reason, Rich? Tell me, what is that reason? Why can't Sony do 60 frames like Microsoft? Explain this to me.
Valid one. This is what a software dev on the PS5 had to say.
Aha, a no-name software dev says this. Mind you, Gears of War 5 had some ray tracing in the game, and it was still able to do 60 frames, Rich. Just saying that.
A former principal software engineer on the PS5 has given some insight into the constraints that keep the console from running games at 60 FPS as standard.
Okay, we're going to skip past this ramblings, but basically what Rich is trying to say in this article is that, and he tries to damage control saying, oh, certain TVs have HDR features that require 30 hertz, thus we're going to be targeting 30 frames and turning up all the graphical details. Rich, you realize that most TVs are 60 freaking hertz, and cheap HDR TVs are like $200 at 30 hertz. Heck, you can get one for $150. If Hard 8 saw this video right now, he would be laughing his ass at you because he knows you don't play games and know anything about TVs whatsoever. So now you're trying to compare TVs to 30 frames per second. Ah, the genius. Let's continue to the good stuff.
Back to Demon Souls, people are losing their minds saying, oh, I thought with next-gen hardware we can have the performance and we can have...
Rich, you realize that Demon Souls will be running at 60 frames. Why do you keep bringing this game up? Why don't you bring up Ratchet & Clank? Why is that running at 30? Is it because of ray tracing? Please keep explaining to me why you keep bringing up Demon Souls.
The better visuals. What's going on? This is insane. And I'm thinking to myself, like...
Yes, it is insane that any game in 2020 is running at 30 frames.
Welcome to the world of PCs.
What? How does PC gaming relate to running a game at 30 frames per second on a TV now? Okay, this went left.
All you console conspiracy theorists, maybe you've never played on PC before, but even with...
Rich, if I'm playing on PC, I am not turning up all the settings to 4K to get 30 frames per second. Heck, I would need to, on my GPU alone, I would need to run 8K to get 30 frames per second at ultra settings.
A 2080 Ti. I'm not pointing to my crotch. I'm pointing to my computer.
Rich, there's barely any games that would be maxed out that would be 4K 30 on a 2080 Ti.
Here has a 2080 Ti in here, and yeah, if I want better visuals, I'll turn up the visuals, and it'll sacrifice frame rate.
So you're gonna turn up visuals on a 2080 Ti and then cap the frame rate at 30? That makes sense.
If I want better performance, I'll turn down the visuals and sacrifice the visuals to get a higher frame rate.
I still don't see how this relates to running a 30 frames per second game if you're turning down settings to get 30 frames.
That's how it works. I have a portable rig that I use when I edit remotely that is a 2070 Super in it. Very capable card, but if I want to use it on my high-end monitor that could do 1440p, 144 hertz, which is 144 frames a second, I still have to turn down the visuals. Sometimes...
So, Rich, now you're saying turn down the visuals on PC to give you higher frame rates. Why does that not apply to consoles? Explain this to me. Your argument is making no sense whatsoever. Are you drunk again? Did you have a mojito again, Rich, when you made that last statement on your last video?
Even to medium on a 2070 Super to get that 144 hertz refresh rate. These are consoles too, and they had to cut some.
And now he's going back to consoles, saying they had to cut corners to get 30 frames. So, how does a console cut corners to get 30 frames per second if they're maxing everything out? That makes no sense.
Corners somewhere, and it's still impressive specs. So
they have impressive specs that they're cutting corners to get 30 FPS. This makes no sense, Rich.
What they're saying about people, like I own some cheap 4K TVs that have HDR.
So you own one of these alleged 4K TVs that runs at 30 hertz with HDR that probably costs $99, Rich. I don't think any normal person is using those because most of these 4K TVs are 60 hertz. And I don't think this no-name developer who says, "Oh, 30 hertz is the reason we're running our games at 30 frames per second."
I own some TCL TVs, so if I want to take advantage of the full color fidelity, I'm going to have to run it at the lower frame rate on some of them. Then I have an...
What the flip does a TCL TV have to do with lower frame rates? Rich, TVs don't have anything to do with lower frame rates on a console, man. Look at this man. He is drunk. Look at his face. You can tell he's drunk right now. Rich, are you dying of alcohol poisoning? Because your brain is slowly shrinking and your hairline is completely receded from this poisoning.
OLED too, but you get my point. These consoles are very capable. They're not pathetic like I saw.
Rich, if they're so capable, the sole reason they're capping at 30 frames per second, according to you, is because of 30 hertz monitors. Then you bring up PC gaming, which has 144 hertz. This whole argument is all over the place.
and I think Blackbond's kind of not looking at the full picture. For
Shots at you, Blackbond. Or he says you're blowing things out of proportion. His argument is 4K 30 hertz TVs are the reason they're doing 30 frames per second. Yes, that's his argument.
a console that's probably going to cost anywhere from $400 to $600, the specs that both of them have, even the PlayStation 5 with its less powerful GPU, is still a substantial boost over.
If it's a substantial boost, Rich, why are last-gen games like Valhalla running at 30 frames per second on these consoles? Is it because of the developers taking advantage of 4K 30 hertz TVs, which are probably like 2% of the market?
For the PS4 Pro, major boost, especially in the CPU department, going from those anemic Jaguar cores to the beastly Zen 2 cores.
Once again, Rich, I have to explain this to you. CPUs have nothing to do with 4K. The reason the X is able to do so well in games in 4K is because it's more GPU bound than CPU bound. The only reason games struggle to run at 60 frames on the Xbox One X, as an example, like Gears of War 4, is because the CPU is garbage. The lower the resolution, the more the CPU is demanded.
Worlds of difference. And it's not just going to be about graphics. It's also going to be about what that CPU could push. Better.
Once again, Rich, if it's not about graphics, then why are you damage controlling for 30 FPS on 4K 30 hertz TVs?
AI, more destructible environments, better physics, better NPC interactions. I guess that falls under AI. But you get my point.
AI's been garbage for generations. I doubt developers are going to do anything. It's all going to be about ray tracing. And then developers are going to say, look at that. We had to drop it to 30 frames on PlayStation because of the ray tracing hardware that AMD hasn't perfected yet. See, guys? See?
It's not. That's why I do think that Microsoft is going to come out with the Lockhart, which will be more so a 1440p, 1080p console, but you're still going to get next-gen experiences.
Yes, Microsoft probably will release a cheaper console. And you know what, Rich? Microsoft's consoles are going to run the games at 60 frames per second.
Because it's going to have the same CPU as the full fat Xbox Series X. It may not have as many pixels, but it's going to...
I still don't know why he's talking about the CPU. The CPU has nothing to do with the graphical detail. Because the GPU does all the ray tracing, the GPU does all the images. The only thing the CPU is doing is the physics and the higher frame rates at the lower resolution.
Be able to give you the same experience because of the more powerful main processor inside of the system.
The only thing impressive about these consoles is their GPU, because the only thing that would be impressive about the consoles is if they were running at 1080p 60 ops and then turning up more settings. That's the only thing.
So that's what people have to realize. Everyone making it, oh, the PS5 is already anemic exposed, or the Series X is already anemic exposed. They're not.
No, Rich, that's just you saying that.
Not anemic. And if you game on PC, you know that if you want to...
Rich, we know you don't game on PC. You game on the Nintendo Switch portably and play games at 362p. But continue.
Get better performance, you got to drop the settings. If you want to get prettier eye candy, you got to bring up the settings and you'll lose.
Okay, so if, once again, Rich, if the consoles are lowering settings, which they aren't, are you saying Microsoft's going to lower settings to get 60 frames? You're not making any sense, my man. You got to lay off the tequilas.
Frame rate. And if you want to be able to nitpick and really fine-tune how your game runs and looks, you should be on a PC anyway.
No, Rich. Consoles should be offering a 60 frames per second moment like you Demon Souls you kept bringing up.
This is Rich of Review Tech.
This is Review Knows Games signing off. So, to sum up Rich's video, guys, I just had a brain aneurysm. I'm going to go lay down real quick and put some ice on my head. My dog's whining because she just had a brain fart because of this guy. I know, baby. His video was terrible. You hear that, guys? The poor dog couldn't stand it. So, let me know what you guys think about this video. Rich is probably going to die alcohol poisoning after this video. This is your boy, Holy One. Ouch! Now I gotta go pet my dog because she's dying of this guy's toxicity.
How's it taste, motherfucker? Ha ha ha!